Hello everyone. Welcome to World of Crime. This story is a heavy one, so I want to give a warning. This is the story of Angela McAnulty, who tortured and abused her own child, Jeanette Maples, to death. Angela would take her daughter into the torture room and turn on the vacuum cleaner to mask the sound so the two younger children wouldn't hear it. Jeanette was forced to sleep on cardboard in a room with blood spattered on the walls, floor, and ceiling. Jeanette was starved and dehydrated. Her lips and mouth were destroyed from being hit with belts and sticks over months. Her face was disfigured, her head in bandages. On her hip, investigators found a wound where the flesh had been so torn away as to expose the bone. In the house, investigators found leather belts and torture devices, as well as chunks of Maples' flesh. This was not an isolated incident. Angela had endured similar abuse as a child. Angela McAnulty was born on October 2, 1968. She was born and raised in Sacramento, California. For several years, her mother Nancy endured severe injuries, abuse, and agony while living with her husband Jerry. Nancy had 5 children altogether. She had 3 children together with Jerry, one of whom is named Angela, whom we will be looking at in this very case, and the other 2 were born during Nancy's previous relationship. When Nancy gave birth to Angela, she was just 18 years old, and she had already had children before her. Growing up, Nancy and Angela had a very close and intimate relationship. Jerry, who is supposedly Angela's father, is an extremely repulsive individual. He had a reputation for being a very intimidating person, so nobody wanted to cross him. At that time, he was also known to be connected to multiple gangs. Jerry had several extramarital affairs and impregnated another woman, Rebecca, while Nancy was expecting Angela. Rebecca became pregnant at the same time as Nancy, and they gave birth at the same time. Meanwhile, both ladies were not aware of each other. Jerry would beat Nancy like a beast every day, leaving bruises all over her body and even beating her while she was pregnant. The neighborhood could see that Jerry had been abusing his wife, but they were too afraid to take any action. Nancy found the strength to file for divorce when Angela was 5 years old, and her request was granted by the court. After leaving Jerry's house, she was living a healthy, independent life, which irritated Jerry. He even became envious when he learned that his ex-wife was going on dates with other men. Jerry initially vowed to exact revenge on Nancy for moving on and being happy without him. He then began stalking her and abusing her whenever he could. Nancy was later discovered dead on the bank of a river with approximately 30 stab wounds on her body. Jerry was the primary suspect in this case, and even his mother had complained to the police station about her son's potential for such an act. However, the police ultimately concluded that Nancy was a victim of a serial killer. To this day, the case is still unsolved. Following her mother's passing, Angela struggled to adjust. Things got worse when she and her 4 siblings were placed in the care of her dangerous and uncaring father. Later, Jerry married Rebecca, who was pregnant at the same time Nancy was. Rebecca had 3 children, 2 of whom belonged to Jerry. Nancy's children never received the same special treatment as Rebecca's children, who were always given more affection and presents on their birthdays. Jerry banned Nancy's children from discussing Nancy in the house, and because they were fed less, they starved more frequently. It seems that Jerry began abusing Rebecca, severely beating her until she started to spill blood. Even in front of the kids, he intimidates and beats her. This also functions as a warning to the kids to stay in their lane, or else they will encounter something similar. The kids are consistently mistreated and physically assaulted, but Nancy's kids always suffer more. In comparison to other kids, Angela experienced more abuse and was more alone and isolated. The children's social lives were completely cut off as a result of their inability to express themselves due to their fear of their father, which prevented them from having a good life. After turning 16, Angela left Jerry's house and stopped attending school. After leaving the house, Angela started dating a man and followed him across the nation. She was introduced to hard drugs during her relationship with this man, and she eventually developed a drug addiction. As soon as she turned 20, she returned to Sacramento, her hometown, where she fell in love with Anthony Maples. They both have a strong drug addiction, which is what brought them together after falling in love. As time went on, they talked about starting a family, so she gave birth to 3 children for him. Anthony Jr., who is 6 years old, Brandon, who is 5 years old, and Jeanette, who is 1 year old. Drug use escalated significantly after Jeanette was born. She did not give a damn about the kids. Drugs were her only concern. It was not until after a few months that Anthony and Angela were taken into custody on drug-related charges that the authorities learned of the children's situation. As a result, the children were placed in the care of a relative, who also happened to be Angela's father, Jerry. The biggest surprise in this situation was that he never abused the children, which was impossible to believe. It was clear that the only reason he took those kids in was to get the child care reimbursement. After serving a year in jail, she was allowed to leave, but the authorities refused to give her custody of her kids because they believed she was not ready to raise them. Angela's attitude toward Jerry became so bothersome that he put the kids in foster care. Angela was only allowed to see her kids once a week under supervision, and even then, she did not always show up. In 2001, 32-year-old Angela reapplied for child custody, and this time, it was granted. While this was going on, the court asked the 3 kids if they wanted to go back with their mother. Only Jeanette consented to accompany her, and the 2 boys refused to go back. The 2 boys may have remembered how she had treated them in the past, which made it simpler for the boys to make those decisions. However, since Jeanette was a baby at the time and was unaware of her mother's behavior, the court should not have allowed Jeanette to make that decision on her own. Jeanette was 7 years old in 2002, but it appears that she now had a younger sister since Angela had another child, named Patience, with an unidentified man. Before long, Richard McAnulty and Angela started dating. They had a child named Richard Jr. together. In 2005, the family decided to relocate from Sacramento to Eugene, Oregon. Jeanette was already 10 years old at the time, and for various reasons, Angela began to change her attitude toward Jeanette. Grounding her in her room for a few hours to several hours was the first step. As things worsened, Jeanette was denied access to the restroom and had to ask permission before using it. Similar to how Angela was treated by her father, Jerry, Jeanette also received different treatment from the other children. This is likely because Angela wanted to project her childhood onto Jeanette. Jeanette was subjected to further torture, including being starved and having no food at all while others were fed well. She ate mostly leftovers from other people, and whenever she attempted to voice her complaints, she was given hot pepper. The torture continued with water, where she was eventually forced to get her water from a toilet bowl or dog bowl, depending on the situation. It seems that Angela has control over the home's water pipes, which occasionally keep her daughter from having her bath. For a whole year, this madness and torture continued. When Jeanette started middle school, everyone there noticed that something was not right in her home. As a result of Angela's aggressive water control, she arrives at school unkempt, smelly, and dirty. Fortunately, she has kind classmates who, upon learning about her predicament, shared their lunches with her and made her feel better. Jeanette was taken under the wing of the lunch lady from her school, who also seemed to give her free food. She was content with that, knowing that she would at least get to enjoy a satisfying meal once a day. Jeanette was found to be a bright young woman. She participated in extracurricular activities and would never leave the library until it closed. At least she was spending more time in a safer environment than her home, the school. Later, when Jeanette began gaining weight, Angela discovered that she had been getting free food from the school. As a result, she was no longer given food at home, and the school meal program eventually ended because of Jeanette's fear of her mother. She typically shows up at school with bruises all over her body, and it was clear that the little child was being abused. Jeanette told a classmate one day about everything that had been going on for her, and it seems that the classmate had told his parent about it as well. Jeanette's friend's parent filed a report with the Child Protective Service, CPS, and the school. Nevertheless, the CPS came to Angela's house and inquired about her daughter's circumstances. Angela responded, claiming that her daughter was an attention seeker and that she had lied. Without conducting any more investigation, the police left the house after observing that the other 2 children were content and that food was plentiful. After the event, Angela lost it. She pulled Jeanette from school, which was her haven, and began taking lessons at home. As a result, the beating she was getting doubled. In addition to squeezing her body and pulling her mouth and teeth with pliers, Angela started beating her with metallic objects. Additionally, Angela forced her two sons to participate in the abuse by having them pack dog poop, which she would later rub on Jeanette's face and make the kids stare at. However, throughout the entire event, Richard turned his gaze away from everything as if nothing was happening. There was another adult present, Richard's mother. She contacted CPS as soon as she became aware of what was going on with Jeanette. After Angela lied about Jeanette's absence, the CPS had to speak with Patience, Angela's younger sister, when they arrived at her home. Patience told CPS that nothing was wrong and that everything was fine, so they left. Patience was only 8 years old at the time. The extent of Angela's torture escalated when she began cutting the girl's wounds with knives and locking her in a dark room. Jeanette was tortured to the point where her wound became so severe that it resulted in a hole in the back of her head, causing brain damage. She also lost the ability to walk, talk, or fight, and ultimately, her own mother's torture claimed her life. Following the incident, Angela left Richard and the kids behind and headed for McDonald's. Richard phoned his mother out of guilt, telling her everything that had happened. The mother then advised him to dial 911 right away. Richard called 911 on December 9, 2009 in the evening and told them everything. The police stormed the house and searched it. They discovered Jeanette Maples' dead body in the room. They discovered bloodstains all over the room, and they discovered all of the weapons Angela had used to beat the girl with bloodstains all over it. Following the investigation, Richard and Angela were both arrested and the two children were placed in foster care. When Jeanette's body was brought in for an autopsy, the cause of death could not be determined because there were numerous possible causes, including malnourishment, torture, and open wounds that could have become infected. Therefore, it was determined that her death was caused by prolonged, deliberate torture. Richard and Angela were charged with murder after considerable questioning revealed their confessions to everything that had occurred. They both pleaded guilty in court, and Richard was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Angela was sentenced to death, but she was acquitted. As a result, Angela had a jury hearing in which many witnesses were accepted, including Richard's and Patience, her second daughter's report. The entire courtroom broke down in tears as Patience seemed to narrate everything. In the end, she received a life sentence without the possibility of release. What's your take on this crime case? How would you describe Angela's attitude? What do you think of the CPS? I would like to conclude by saying, let us unite against child maltreatment, fostering a culture where silence is unacceptable. Share your emotions in the comment section below, and don't forget to follow and subscribe to our channel for more videos. Thank you for watching.